The ceremony was already halfway over when I realized they weren't coming. I kept scanning the bleachers. Empty rows. Folding chairs. Other families cheering too loud. My name echoed through the auditorium speakers. Polite applause. Strangers clapping for me. I walked across the stage alone. Shook the dean's hand. Smiled for a camera that wasn't mine. Afterward, I stood outside near the parking lot for 20 minutes. Cars pulled away. Parents hugged their kids. My phone stayed silent. That was the first time I understood something clearly. In my family, absence was a decision. A week before graduation, I asked my dad one simple question. Are you coming? We were in his kitchen. The same kitchen with the outdated oak cabinets and the fluorescent light that hummed when it flickered on. He didn't look at me right away. He was scrolling through something on his phone. What day is it? He asked. Friday. 10 a.m. He sighed lightly, like I'd just handed him a scheduling problem. That's quarter end, he said. You know how that is. I did know. Quarter end meant meetings. Calls. Numbers being rearranged into better stories. It's 2 hours, I said. I can save you a seat. He leaned back in his chair. I'm proud of you, he said. But you already have the degree. The ceremony is symbolic. Symbolic. I nodded. Across the table, my mom stirred her coffee and didn't look up. I'll try, he added, which in our house meant no. My brother chimed in from the living room. I've got work, he said. Tell us how it goes. Tell us how it goes. Like I was attending a dentist appointment. That wasn't the first time something important to me had been reduced to optional. When I got into that university, my acceptance letter came with a partial scholarship. I remember holding the envelope in my hands, heart racing. Dad read it once and said, "State schools are practical." Practical. When I made the dean's list sophomore year, he texted back a thumbs up emoji. When I worked 2 jobs junior year to avoid taking on more loans, he told relatives, she's learning responsibility. Learning. Like I wasn't already carrying it. The night before graduation, I laid my gown across the back of my bedroom chair in my tiny apartment. The fabric smelled faintly like storage plastic. I texted him one more time. Reminder. 10 a.m. parking fills up. He replied 3 hours later. Busy tomorrow. Proud of you. No punctuation. No plan to show up after. The morning of the ceremony, I kept checking my phone anyway. Hope is stubborn. When I walked into the auditorium and saw the sea of families holding bouquets and balloons, I felt something tight in my chest. I scanned the bleachers. Not because I believed they'd surprise me. Because I wanted to be wrong about them. They didn't come. After the ceremony, I stood outside by the concrete steps while families took photos. A girl next to me asked her dad to retake a picture because her hair looked flat. Her dad laughed and said, "You've got time." I pretended to check my email. When my phone finally buzzed, it wasn't from him. It was from my landlord reminding me rent was due next week. I drove home alone. That afternoon, Dad posted on social media. Not about my graduation. About a new property acquisition. Proud of what we're building, the caption read. The comments filled with congratulations. I stared at the screen for a long time. That was when the pattern became impossible to ignore. It wasn't that he didn't have time. He didn't allocate it. For him, attention was an investment. He invested where returns were visible. When I told him I planned to move to another city after graduation for an entry-level hospitality job, he said, "Why that field? It's unstable." "I like it," I said. "You like a lot of things," he replied. "Focus. Focus." As if passion was a distraction. But I took the job anyway. Front desk at a mid-range hotel chain. Late shifts. Angry guests. Managers who promised growth but mostly offered more shifts. I learned things that he would never value. How to read people in 10 seconds. How to fix problems quietly. How to keep my voice calm when someone else wasn't. 3 months into that job, I asked Dad for advice about negotiating a promotion. He said, "You don't have leverage yet." Leverage. I started noticing how often that word came up. Leverage. Return. Optics. He didn't talk about joy. He talked about positioning. When I told him I was saving to eventually open my own small boutique property one day, he smiled politely. That's ambitious, he said. Just don't get in over your head. He said it like a warning. Like failure was inevitable. I stopped sharing details after that. Not out of anger. Out of efficiency. Every conversation with him required justification. Every plan required defending. So I kept my goals to myself. I worked double shifts. I studied market trends at night. I watched how small independent hotels built loyalty without massive marketing budgets. I didn't tell him when I got promoted to assistant manager. I didn't tell him when I started meeting investors quietly. Because I remembered standing in that parking lot after graduation. Phone silent. Bleachers empty. I understood something then. If they couldn't show up for symbolic milestones, they would never show up for uncertain beginnings. And uncertain beginnings are where real work happens. The first hotel I invested in wasn't glamorous. It was a tired roadside property off a highway exit most people drove past without noticing. Faded blue sign. Parking lot with more cracks than lines. The lobby smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. I didn't tell my family about it. I signed the paperwork in a small bank office with beige walls and a loan officer who asked me 3 times if I was sure. I understand the risk, I said. He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. My dad would have said the same thing. Risk. Unstable. Overreaching. So I stopped inviting his commentary. That became a pattern. When I refinanced the property after the first year, I didn't call him for advice. When I negotiated a supplier contract that cut operating costs by 12%, I didn't text him the win. When occupancy rates finally crossed 75% in year 2, I celebrated by buying myself a better desk chair. No family dinner. No announcement. Just quiet numbers improving. Meanwhile, at home, the pattern stayed consistent. Family events revolved around my brother's updates. His new car. His networking dinners. His big moves. Dad would lean back in his chair, asking follow-up questions like a board member evaluating strategy. When it was my turn to speak, the questions were shorter. Still doing the hotel thing? Is that profitable yet? Must be exhausting. Exhausting. I learned to answer in summaries. It's steady. That word seemed to disappoint him. Steady doesn't impress. Steady doesn't dominate headlines. But steady compounds. There were small erasures too. One Christmas, Dad handed my brother an envelope in front of everyone. Seed capital, he said. Every entrepreneur needs a push. My brother grinned. I had never asked for seed capital. Not because I didn't need it. Because I already knew the answer. Later that night, my aunt pulled me aside in the kitchen. You're the strong one, she said softly. You don't need the help. That's how families justify imbalance. They rebrand neglect as confidence. I smiled and nodded. By year 3, I acquired a second property. This one in a small downtown district that was slowly being revitalized. Brick facade. Narrow hallways. A rooftop that nobody had used in a decade. I saw potential. Dad saw nothing. Because he didn't know. I stopped posting updates on social media. Stopped sending group messages. Stopped inviting feedback. I became an observer of my own family. At dinners, I listened more than I spoke. When Dad criticized the hospitality industry as soft money, I didn't defend it. When he bragged about commercial real estate returns, I didn't compare numbers. When relatives asked what I was really planning long-term, I said, we'll see. The erasure was subtle but consistent. Family photos were taken without me when I arrived late from work. Group texts discussed vacations without checking my schedule. Once, I found out through Facebook that they'd hosted a Sunday barbecue at my parents' house the week before. We didn't want to bother you, my mom said when I mentioned it. Bother. As if my presence required accommodation. I realized something important then. It wasn't that I was forgotten. It was that I was categorized. Independent. Self-sufficient. Low priority. And because I never protested, the system stayed intact. The hotels grew slowly. 1 became 3. 3 became 7. I hired carefully. promoted internally, kept debt structured conservatively. When a regional business journal mentioned my company in a small column about emerging operators, I clipped the article and put it in a drawer. I didn't send it to my dad. I didn't need to test his response. By year 5, I had investors calling me. Not the other way around. One of them recognized my last name and asked if I was related to my father. Yes, I said. He raised his eyebrows. I didn't realize you were connected. I didn't correct him. Because I wasn't connected. Not in the way people assumed. By the time national media picked up the story about my expanding portfolio and estimated valuation, I hadn't spoken to my dad about business in over a year. He knew I worked in hotels. He didn't know the numbers. He never asked. He assumed if it mattered, he would already know. That assumption is what made the headline so loud. The headline went live at 6:12 a.m. I know the time because my phone started vibrating on the nightstand before my alarm. Hospitality operator builds $99 million boutique empire. They used the word empire. I would have chosen portfolio. But headlines aren't built for nuance. By 6:20, my inbox was full. Investors. Industry peers. A former manager from my first job. Even the loan officer from that beige bank office sent a short note. Looks like you were sure. I made coffee and read the article slowly. They mentioned the early roadside property, the downtown renovation, the conservative debt structure, the retention rates. They quoted me accurately. No drama. Just numbers. By 7:03 a.m., my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. Dad. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I declined the call. A minute later, a text came through. Saw the article. Call me. No congratulations. No acknowledgement. Just instruction. I set the phone face down and finished my coffee. By noon, the story had been shared across industry pages. Someone tagged my company on LinkedIn. The comments were professional. Curious. Impressed. At 1:17 p.m., another text. Family comes first. I stared at that sentence longer than I expected. Family comes first. Not I'm proud of you. Not I was wrong. Not I should have been there. Just a reminder. Like I had forgotten something. I didn't reply. That evening, my brother called. You could have told us, he said. Told you what? I asked. That it was this big. It grew, I said. There was a pause. Dad's voice filtered faintly in the background. My brother lowered his tone. He feels blindsided. Blindsided. I thought about that word carefully. I remembered standing in a parking lot after graduation. Phone silent. Bleachers empty. That was blindsided. I didn't hide anything, I said. You just didn't ask. Another pause. Are you mad? He asked. No. And that was the truth. Anger requires heat. I felt cool. Measured. That night, Dad called again. This time I answered. He didn't waste time. You should have looped me in, he said. In what? I asked. In expansion. In strategy. In capital planning. He spoke like I had withheld quarterly reports. I didn't need outside capital, I said. Silence. Then softer, that's not the point. What is the point? I asked. The point is we're family. There it was again. Family. The same word that hadn't been available on graduation day. The same word that didn't apply when I asked him to attend a ceremony. You didn't come to my graduation, I said quietly. He exhaled. That was years ago. Yes. And this is now. More silence. I've built something significant, he said finally. We should align. Align. It sounded like a merger proposal. I could almost see him in his office chair, leaning back, calculating synergy. I'm not looking to align, I said. He didn't respond immediately. You're making this emotional, he said. I almost smiled. I'm not, I replied. There was a shift in his breathing. You don't understand the optics, he continued. People will connect us. They already do, I said. And I don't control that. What I didn't say was this. I had built everything without his name attached. Without his seed capital. Without his network. Without his applause. He tried a different angle. We could structure something, he said. A joint venture. It makes sense. For a moment, I pictured it. My portfolio under his umbrella. His reputation absorbing my growth. A headline reframed. Father-daughter empire. I saw the narrative forming. No, I said. Just that. No explanation. No counteroffer. No softening. On the other end of the line, I heard something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not pride. Confusion. You're turning your back on your family, he said. I thought about that. If building quietly without them was turning my back, then maybe I had been turned around for years without noticing. I'm continuing forward, I said. That was the last full conversation we had for months. After that, there were smaller attempts. A forwarded article about legacy businesses. An invitation to a networking event for exposure. A suggestion that we appear together on a panel about generational leadership. I declined each one. Politely. Briefly. No announcements. No public statements. Just distance. And the more distance I created, the clearer something became. He wasn't upset about my success. He was upset he hadn't controlled it. The silence after that wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. He stopped calling directly. Messages came through my brother first. Then my mom. Then a mutual contact in commercial real estate who mentioned casually that my dad was considering hospitality expansion. Considering. As if he had always planned it. I didn't respond to any of it. The article about my company kept circulating for a few weeks. A podcast invited me on to talk about disciplined growth. A trade journal requested a follow-up piece about conservative debt strategy in uncertain markets. I agreed to one interview. I spoke about cash flow management, guest retention, slow scaling. I didn't mention my family. I didn't mention absence. I didn't mention the parking lot after graduation. The systems that matter don't care about personal history. They care about performance. Meanwhile, I heard things through quiet channels. One of my dad's projects had stalled. Permits delayed. Financing tightened. Investors asking more questions than before. Nothing catastrophic. Just friction. Friction is expensive. Especially when confidence has been your currency. A banker I'd worked with once called me for lunch. Neutral territory. Midday. Fluorescent lighting and bland sandwiches. I didn't realize you weren't aligned with your father's firm, he said. I'm not, I replied. He nodded slowly. Interesting. That word carries weight in financial circles. Interesting means recalibrating assumptions. It means credit models adjust. It means reputations are evaluated independently. My dad had spent decades building a brand around control. When people realized I had built mine without him, it disrupted that symmetry. Not publicly. Quietly. His name stopped appearing beside mine in articles. Industry events stopped assuming partnership. A few investors reached out to me directly instead of through him. Access shifted. That's when I understood something fully. I hadn't needed to expose him. I had simply needed to operate without him. Months passed. No dramatic confrontation. No family summit. Just distance settling into routine. One afternoon, I ran into him at a regional business conference. Hotel ballroom. Patterned carpet. Coffee that tasted burnt. He saw me across the room and walked over. He looked the same. Measured. Pressed suit. Controlled smile. Congratulations, he said. The words sounded practiced. Thank you, I replied. There was a long pause between us. You've done well, he added. I nodded. So have you, I said. Polite. Neutral. He glanced around the room, then back at me. We could still collaborate, he said quietly. There it was again. Collaboration. Alignment. Integration. Different words for the same idea. No, I said. Not sharp. Not cold. Just steady. He studied my face, searching for something. Approval. Guilt. Hesitation. He didn't find it. You've changed, he said. Maybe. Or maybe I'd just stopped waiting. I grew, I replied. Another pause. He nodded once. Family still matters, he said. It does, I agreed. But we both knew that word meant different things now. He walked away first. I didn't watch him leave. I turned back toward the ballroom doors and stepped into the hallway where the noise softened. The truth is, nothing exploded. There was no dramatic downfall. His firm still exists. His projects still move, slower now. My hotels continue operating. Occupancy fluctuates. Markets shift. Interest rates rise and fall. Real life continues. What changed wasn't the numbers. It was the narrative. For years, I believed that being overlooked meant I needed to work harder for acknowledgement. That if I built something undeniable, applause would follow. But applause is unreliable. Absence taught me something more valuable. You don't build for the people who don't show up. You build for yourself. That parking lot after graduation felt like rejection. Now I see it differently. It was permission. Permission to stop seeking validation from a system that never intended to give it. He texted me, "Family comes first." And for the first time, I understood. Family does come first. The one you build. The one you protect. The one that shows up. Everything else is just noise. And I stopped listening.